And the man who inspired this dramatic change in garden design was Lancelot Capability Brown. Next year will mark the 300th anniversary of his birth, and there'll be a festival about him and his work. He consulted on the garden design at Ugbrook near Chudley, at Mam Head in Team Bridge, and at Widdicombe with an I in the South Hams, and possibly Sharpham on the banks of the River Dart, where we find gardener and archivist Richard Soans.
We don't actually know who designed the landscape, although it's always been said that Brown did design it.
Capability Brown.
Capability Brown, yes. But sadly, there is not yet any documentary proof of that. There are many people who've looked at the landscape who know a great deal about Brown and think it is by Brown, but we can't prove it. Maybe one day we will be able to.
So what are the features that suggest it might be his?
Just the way that the plantings are placed in the landscape, certain features like pairs of trees, which apparently he was very keen on, the way that a lot of sort of the woodland, the original sort of farming features have been swept away. And there's an internal carriage drive that goes for 3 miles round the estate. And various features in it, you just get beautiful views of the different features of the estate and of the countryside around. And it's, it is an 18th century landscape, whether it's Brown or not.
Does it frustrate you, though, that there's no documentary proof? Or is it a way more interesting, the fact that it is the landscape itself?
It is interesting that it can't be proved at the moment that it's Brown, because it makes you puzzle about it and look at it more carefully, and other people are interested to find out, more about it. Whereas if it was Brown, we'd just all take it for granted, probably.
That's interesting, because I suppose if you know you've got a Capability Brown landscape, you really make the most of it, don't you?
Yes. The Trust are very interested in the landscape, and they've had a landscape survey done of it by the leading sort of Capability Brown expert, and he's fairly sure it is by Brown.
We're inside today, in the house itself, but if we actually wander over to the windows, we do look out on the River Dart below, sweeping off to our left. It is stunning, isn't it?
Oh, it's amazing. I think it's one of the most beautiful spots in Devon.
And do you think of yourself in an 18th century landscape when you see it?
Yes, I do. It's been slightly degraded in places, and it needs tweaking, shall we say, to bring it back to its full 18th century beauty. But I think the Trust are interested in doing that.
And what would that require?
Well, for instance, if we look down to the river here, immediately before the river, there is a plantation of conifers which were planted in the 1960s, which really have nothing to do with an 18th century idea of landscape. But there are plans afoot to remove those and open up the views more to the river.
As a gardener, is that problematic for you in some ways, given that you're seeing trees that exist now in the 21st century? Do you want to see them go? Can you ever genuinely take a garden back to a particular period? And should you?
Well, it's possible to do that. The National Trust do it all the time. And I think here it would be worth doing.
So were Capability Brown to return, if he was here in the first place, what do you think he would make of this view and this landscape around Sharpham today?
Well, I think he'd be reasonably happy. I'm sure he'd suggest some alterations. I don't think he'd be too upset.